Hello friends, this is Sanjay. In this video, we will talk about cognition and emotions, which is part of the Karnataka TET CDP syllabus for paper 1 and paper 2. In this series, I have covered only those topics which are important from your exam perspective. We'll start with an understanding of what is cognition. Then we'll look at what are the elements of cognition. Then we'll understand what are emotions and what are the different types of emotions. Then we'll see what is the difference between emotions, feelings and moods. And then we'll understand what is the effect of emotions on cognition and what is emotional intelligence. At the end of this video, we'll solve some sample questions from previous question papers. So let's get started. What is cognition? There are many theoretical definitions of cognition. However, the easiest way to understand what all these definitions are saying is this. Every day we get data, we get information, and we get experiences from our surroundings. Now, cognition is the process through which we convert this data, information, and experiences into knowledge and skills, or behaviors and attitudes, or values and preferences. So this looks very much like thinking that we discussed in one of the previous videos. Because when we spoke about thinking, there also we discussed that every day we get data, information, and experiences, and we use thinking to convert that data, information and experiences into knowledge and skills, behaviors or values. So is cognition the same as thinking? Thinking and cognition are very similar, but for the fact that cognition includes all the operations of our brain, whereas thinking includes only the intentional or the deliberate operations of our brain. So cognition includes thinking. Cognition is bigger than thinking. Let me give you a small example. Yesterday, when I was watering some plants in my garden, I accidentally touched a cactus and I felt some pain. So that was a sensation. I felt a sensation of pain. That was not intentional. Right? Now, when I felt the pain, that's when I looked at what was happening, and that's when perception happened. I paid some attention to what was happening. I realized that I'm standing very close to a cactus and I must have accidentally touched it and I got pricked, and that's why I'm feeling the pain. So I did thinking. So cognition means the sensation which was not intentional, and then the perception and the thinking which was intentional. So cognition is much bigger than just thinking. When we look at the elements of cognition, it starts with this sensation, and it also includes perception, where I'm paying attention to the sensation, right? And then there is recognition of what is happening. I'm using language in my brain to do all the processing, and I'm also conceptualizing, that is, I'm connecting what is this? This is a cactus. Cactus has some thorns prick. So I'm using some concepts. If needed, I will use some logic and reasoning. Am I hurt? Do I need to get first aid? It is a very small thorn, so it might not require too much of a effort to take it out. So I'm using some logic and reasoning and problem solving if it is required. And from this entire episode, I have learned something, right, which I will keep in my memory so that next time I'll remember not to stand so close to the cactus. So these are all the elements of cognition. Now, what are emotions? Emotions are reactions that we experience in response to a stimuli. And these stimuli can be events or situations. For example, when I see somebody that I like, then I might feel happy, I might smile. When I see somebody that I hate, then I might feel angry. When I see somebody that I love, then I might feel very excited. So these are all reactions that I'm experiencing in response to stimuli. And these stimuli can be events or situations or people. The type of emotion and the strength of the emotion is determined by the circumstance triggering the emotion. For example, look at this picture. So what kind of an emotion is this picture triggering in you? If you just had food and your stomach is full, then this picture of hot samosas might not trigger any kind of an emotion, or it might trigger a very weak emotion. Whereas if you have been hungry since morning, then this photo can trigger a feeling of hunger, and it can trigger a feeling of desire where you want to go and have hot food. So the type of emotion and the strength of the emotion is determined by the circumstance triggering the emotion. And people experience emotional and physical response at the same time. For example, if I'm afraid, I'm feeling fear. That is an emotion. And when I'm afraid, my blood pressure might increase, my heart rate might increase. So there is a physical response as well. And our thoughts are actually responsible for our emotions. For example, if I'm afraid of snakes and I see a snake, then I am sensing the snake through my eyes. I'm taking in that sensation, and then my brain is doing all the thinking, and that thought is actually resulting in an emotion of fear. So our thoughts are actually responsible for our emotions. Next, let us talk about the concept of basic and secondary emotions. Now, basic or primary emotions are reactions such as fear, anger, sadness, disgust. And secondary emotions are feelings. These are complex emotions such as guilt, shame, confusion. One day you are going on a road and there is a loud noise behind you. Boom. And the first emotion that you might feel here is fear. Right? That is a basic or a primary emotion. And then you turn around to see what happened. Where did this noise come from? Then you see that there are some small kids lighting firecrackers in the middle of the road. So you might experience anger, which is again a basic or a primary emotion. And you will shout at those kids, right? Because they should not be lighting firecrackers in the middle of the road in the middle of the day. So you shout at them and you walk away from there. After some time, you might start feeling that I should not have shouted at the kids, just small kids playing with some firecrackers. It was nothing serious, right? So there you started feeling some remorse that you should not have shouted at the kids. You should not have overreacted. So that way you are feeling a secondary emotion here. So first you felt fear, which is a basic or a primary emotion. Next you felt anger, which is again a basic or a primary emotion. And then you felt a secondary emotion, which is a feeling of remorse. So these are basic and secondary emotions. An American psychologist called Robert Plutchik came up with this concept of Plutchik's wheel of emotions. So he used this wheel to explain how the strength of some basic or primary emotions can change, and how different basic or primary emotions can be combined to form more complex emotions, that is secondary emotions. For example, if fear is a basic emotion, then if it is a very strong sense of fear, then that becomes terror. If the sense of fear is very weak, then it is just worry or apprehension. Similarly, if you trust somebody, then if the trust is just weak, then it is acceptance. If it is very strong, then that becomes admiration. And trust and fear can be combined to form a more complex emotion, that is a secondary emotion called submission. So this is Plutchik's wheel of emotion. Some of the other points about emotions is that emotions can be positive or negative. For example, happiness is a positive emotion and sadness is a negative emotion. And emotions are a subjective and a cognitive experience. For example, both of us might be looking at the same stimuli, but your emotion might be different from mine. For example, if both of us are looking at the same dog, you might feel happy, whereas I might feel afraid, even though both of us are looking at the same stimuli. Because this emotion is very subjective and it depends on what kind of cognitive experience I've had with that particular dog. For example, I might think that dogs are dangerous, so I might be afraid. You might think dogs are friendly, so your cognitive experience says that the dogs are friendly, so you are happy. So that way, emotions can be subjective and they are dependent on your cognitive experience. And emotions can cause physiological responses and behavioral responses. For example, when I see a dog, I might feel afraid. When I feel afraid, my blood pressure might increase, my heart rate might increase. So that is a physiological response. And I might run away from there. So that is a behavioral response. Now, let us look at the connection between emotions, feelings, and moods. Suppose you have applied for some exam and the result comes and you realize that you have not cleared the exam. So your reaction to that stimuli, the stimuli being the result. So your reaction will be the basic or the primary emotion. So that is emotion. And then you go home and you think a little more and you realize that you should have spent a little more time in preparation. You should have put in a little more effort. So then you start feeling some guilt and remorse. So that is a feeling, and you are experiencing this feeling, this secondary emotion, because of the primary emotion of sadness. And moods are temporary emotional states. For example, some days I wake up and I don't want to study. Right? It is not that I'm sad. It is just that on that particular day, I don't feel like studying. So that feeling of not wanting to study will go away after some time. So moods are temporary emotional states. Now that we have seen what are emotions and what is cognition, let us see what is the effect of emotions on cognition. So historically, there has been quite a bit of debate on this, and some psychologists believe that emotion is independent from cognition, they don't affect each other, whereas other psychologists argued that cognitive processing or cognition can be used to understand emotions, that is, they are connected. But what is universally accepted now is that emotion strongly influences cognitive process. So, emotion strongly influences perception, attention, learning, memory, reasoning, and problem solving as well. From a teaching learning perspective, emotion can affect attention, motivation, and behavior as well. If the children are not paying attention, they will not learn anything. If they are not motivated, they will not learn anything. If their behavior is not appropriate, they will not learn anything. Which means that we have to pay a lot of attention to emotion because it can affect the teaching learning process itself. Now, let us talk about emotions and learning. Now, the first thing is positive emotions act as motivators in learning, right? Because when a person is happy, then he is more likely to be interested in learning something. So, positive emotions act as motivators. Negative emotions may hamper or hinder the learning process. Obviously, if a person is sad, then he or she might not be able to pick up something because he or she is not paying attention in class. So, negative emotions are bad for the learning process. And extreme emotions can be distracting. If a person is very happy or a person is very sad, then they are not paying attention in class. So, extreme emotions can be distracting. Next, positive emotions may act as cognitive reinforcement. If positive emotions are motivators, then they are also cognitive reinforcement because they will reinforce the teaching learning process as well. And let us look at how can a teacher deal with emotions in the classroom. Now, as a teacher, you should be aware of individual emotions as well as group emotions because sometimes the entire class as a group might be happy about something or might be afraid of something, might be worried about something. So you should be aware of group emotions as well. And you should teach children how to recognize and deal with their own emotions because this is an opportunity for you as a teacher to develop emotional intelligence in children. And children will participate better in the classroom, they will be more happier in the classroom if they feel a sense of belonging and a feeling of safety in the classroom. So that's something which you have to promote as a teacher. And if you make learning more enjoyable and more relatable, then that becomes a fun activity. So that is a positive emotion. So that will be a motivator for learning. And by sharing appreciation, admiration, and positivity in the classroom, you are bringing in a positive energy or a positive emotion into the classroom. Therefore, as a teacher, these are some of the basic steps that you need to take to deal with emotions in the classroom. Next, let us briefly talk about emotional intelligence. When we were discussing about multiple intelligences theory in one of the other videos, we spoke about interpersonal intelligence and intrapersonal intelligence. So, children or adults who have a high degree of emotional intelligence are likely to have a high degree of intrapersonal intelligence and interpersonal intelligence as well. So, this emotional intelligence means that it is the ability to identify and manage one's own emotions as well as the emotions of others. If I'm angry with somebody, right? And if my emotional intelligence is low, then I will react in this situation, right? Because of the anger, I might do something that I will regret later on. But if I have a certain degree of emotional intelligence, then I will realize that I'm angry and I should not do anything now. I should stop myself. So I will wait till I calm down. I will look at the entire situation rationally and then I will respond. I will never react. So, people who are emotionally intelligent have a high degree of self-confidence and they are very sure about themselves because when they are feeling happy, they know why they are feeling happy. When they are feeling sad, they know why they are feeling sad. So, they know to understand their own emotions and control them. And persons with a high degree of emotional intelligence can be better leaders. They can be more successful in life, right? And it helps them immensely in dealing with people anywhere they go. So if we can teach about this emotional intelligence to children right from their school days, it will help them in the long run in academic success as well as career success. Next, let us solve some sample questions from previous question papers. The first question is, which one of the following is best suited for emotional development of children? The last one says authoritarian classroom environment. Authoritarian is like a dictator. If the teacher is taking all the decisions and the students are not participating in the decision making process, so this is definitely not good for emotional development of children. Next, controlled classroom environment. So controlled classroom environment is a very strict classroom environment. So this again is not good for emotional development. No involvement of the teacher as it is the task of the parents. So if the teacher is not getting involved in the classroom at all, then this is definitely not a correct option. So democratic classroom environment where the students and the teacher are participating in the decision making process and everybody is having a say, everybody has a voice. That is a democratic classroom environment, and that definitely is good for the emotional development of children. Which of the following has been least discussed in psychology of emotion? Now the first one says emotion is a subjective feeling and varies from person to person. This has been discussed quite extensively. Emotions are a complex pattern of arousal and cognitive interpretation. This is also discussed quite extensively in all the textbooks. Emotional process involves physiological as well as psychological reactions. As we discussed, emotions lead to physiological, psychological and behavioral reactions. So this is also studied extensively. Now options 1 and options 3 and options 4 are all talking about emotions at an individual level. If you look at option 2, it says that emotions may not only occur within individual students but also within the entire class. So group emotions is something that is not studied extensively, has not been discussed much in many of the textbooks. Therefore, option 2 is the fact which has been least discussed in psychology of emotion. The following skills are involved in emotional intelligence except which of the following? Now, there are 4 skills that are mentioned here. So we have to identify which of these options is not involved in emotional intelligence. So the last one is management of emotions. Managing emotions is very much a part of emotional intelligence. So this is a skill that is part of emotional intelligence. Next, awareness of emotions. If you are not aware of emotions, how can you manage them? So this is also an essential skill. Next, criticism of emotions. Criticism means not just about criticizing in a negative way, right? Just like a film critic writes about the good things and the bad things about a movie. So criticism of emotions means that you are looking at the good things and the bad things of a emotion. So criticism of emotion is also required for emotional intelligence. Now, amicable relation with class fellows, that is good relationship with class fellows. This can be the result of emotional intelligence and not a skill that is required for emotional intelligence. Therefore, this is the answer here. Anyone can become angry. That is easy. But to be angry with the right person, to the right degree, at the right time, for the right purpose and in the right way, that is not easy. This is related to which of the following? Now we are talking about anger here, right? And why it is very necessary to be angry at the right person, at the right degree, at the right time, for the right purpose. So we are talking about emotional development here. We are not talking about social development, cognitive development or physical development. So this is about emotional development. Which of the following statements about cognition and emotion is correct? Cognition and emotion are processes independent of each other. Definitely not. They are not independent of each other. Cognition and emotions are intertwined and affect each other. This is absolutely correct because they are deeply connected, intertwined, and they affect each other. Cognition affects emotions, but emotions don't affect cognition. This is completely incorrect because cognition and emotions affect each other, right? And emotions affect cognition, but cognition does not affect emotions. This is also incorrect because both cognition and emotions affect each other. Therefore, the answer here is cognition and emotions are intertwined, that is, they are deeply connected and they affect each other. And with that, we come to the end of this video. If you have any questions or feedback, please put them in the comment section below. And I will see you again in the next part of this video series. Till then, take care, stay safe.